Good morning, BookTube, YouTube. I know here I said BookTube. The other morning, the other day, I was watching a video of a person in YouTube or BookTube, and I commented to them. They were talking about BookTube and things like that, and I said, I don't know if I'm a booktuber. I'm just a person here in YouTube land, which is probably millions of people all over the world, and they sit in front of a camera and they talk about whatever they talk about. And I'm here because to talk about books, talk about my diary, talk about my life, and that's what I do. So today is March the 18th, 2021. It is 6:58 here in the morning, here in West Michigan. I'm up to face another day. I don't know, it's supposed to rain today. Light rain, cold. This morning on my diary, I'm on page 288 for March the 18th, 2021. And I got out to read this morning, Reformed Dogmatics, Sin and Salvation in Christ, Volume 3. And I thought what I'd do is, yesterday I did a video and I called it Used Thrift Store Used Book Haul or something like that, Used Books Haul, Part 1. Was it number 1 or Part 1? I don't know. But yesterday, I went around local thrift stores. I went back to Holland Rescue Mission thrift store, Gateway Center. And then on the way home, I stopped at Bibles to Mexico. And then I drove up to Goodwill, Northside. And I found a few books. And I thought I'd show them to you. I still have 2 other stacks of used books from thrift stores in the living room, but what this video is to show you that I am a book collector. And I've said this over the years. I collect books. That's what I do. I sit around the house all the time. I'm not really into anything except books. Well, I'm into my wife and my children and grandchildren, and I'm into humanity. And if it wasn't for the COVID-19 plague, I'd be volunteering at the local library used bookstore, which has been closed since last March. I don't know when it's ever going to open again. But I'm into books. In the mornings, as I've said, as a Christian, I read the Bible, I pray, I read these kinds of books in the mornings for devotions. Still reading this book. And my hobby is going around a couple of years ago, I don't know, probably around 2005, 2006 maybe. I used to go to just used book sales and the Book Nook. And then one time we were at some Goodwill store and I saw that they were selling books. Well, back in those days, since I was working, I didn't have energy to read anything outside of Christian literature. I was working, raising my family, and I just didn't have the mental capacity to read. Now, as I said, I always read a little bit of Jack Kerouac, The Beats, and once in a while I read a novel by John Updike or Philip Roth or Saul Bellows or John Irving's or somebody like that. But I didn't, for many, many years, I just read the Bible and the 17th century English Puritans and Reformed theology. I've been reading Bavinck for 45 years. Now, this is a translation of his Dogmatics. Many years ago, Baker Bookhouse published just in one volume The Doctrine of God, and then they published his on eschatology, and then his book on something else. I can't remember what it was. Creation, God, and they did another volume. But then this was published in 2006. They translated out of Dutch Herman Bavinck's 4-volume Reformed Dogmatics, which is, as I said, it's one of my favorite dogmatics. So then, but when I got fired from my job in 2007, it took me a couple of years to get back to normal, and then I started reading from all over the place. I started reading history and books on art and fiction, and I just started reading whatever I wanted to read because kids were growing up. They had left the nest and were getting married and having kids and working, and so it was just Carol and I here. But I've always just read Christian books in the mornings, and then in the afternoons and evenings I read other books. Anyway, to make a long story short, I went to thrift stores yesterday, and what this is going to show you an example of book collecting, how I collect books. I came across this book at Holland Rescue Mission Thrift Store Gateway Center. This is called The Chan's Great Continent, China and the Western Minds by Jonathan D. Spence. This book kind of intrigued me because it says China has transfixed the West since the earliest contacts between these civilizations. Now, Jonathan Spence, our foremost historian of Chinese politics and culture, tells us in an elegant new book how the West has understood China over 7 centuries, ranging from Marco Polo's own depiction of China and the mighty Khan Kublai in the 1270s to the China sightings of 3rd century writers as acknowledged genius Kafka, Borges, and Covino. Spence explores Western thought on China through a remarkable array of expression. And when I found this, I have 2 other books by this Jonathan D. Spence. And so yesterday, when I got this book, I went downstairs and I looked around the lower level for the 2 other books I had by Jonathan Spence. Because when I find a book, I usually have, most of the times I have another book by the person. And I have this book by Jonathan D. Spence, The Memory Palace of Matteo Ricci. And what this is, it says in the back, quote, a gripping portrait of a late 16th century cultural history of both the West and the East. In 1577, the Jesuit priest Matteo Ricci set out from Italy to bring Christian faith and Western thought to the Ming Dynasty China. To capture the emotional and religious drama of Ricci's extraordinary life, Jonathan Spence has just shifted away from conventional biographical techniques and relates his subject life to several images that Ricci created. 4 images derived from events in the Bible and others from a book on the art of memory that Ricci wrote in Chinese and circulated among members of the Ming Dynasty elite. A rich and compelling narrative about a remarkable life. The Memory Palace of Matteo Ricci is also a significant work of global history, juxtaposing the world of counter-Reformation Europe with that of Ming China. I also have this little book by Jonathan D. Spence, The Death of Woman Wang. It's like looking at Chinese life in providential China in the 17th century. He's written a lot of books on China. So I'm always looking for books by Jonathan T. Spence on China. And then I found this book at the Gateway Center, Killing Custer, The Battle of Little Bighorn and the Fate of the Plain Indians. And this is by James Welch with Paul Strekler. I have 3 other books or novels by James Welch, and this is one of my favorite ones, The Heartsong of Charging Elk, a novel by James Welch. I read this a couple of years ago. I don't know if I finished it, but I really enjoyed it. It's really a great book. It's about an Indian who works in the Wild Bill Cody show back there in the turn of the century, and he in those was it Wild Bill Cody, they would enact cowboys and Indians and fighting, and Wild Bill Cody, he would use real Indians. And one time he was in Europe, in England and France, they would have their big shows and they'd have Indians. And one of the Indians, his name was Charging Elk, he gets sick in France. And they just put him in the hospital. And the guy doesn't speak English, he just speaks his native Indian language. And he gets in the hospital and he wakes up and he recovers, but they've left him there. They've left him there in France. And he doesn't speak the language. He doesn't know the culture. He's an Indian from the American plains, and he wakes up and he has to survive. So and he can't speak French. He can't speak English. But in his own country, when he was in America, and before he was in the Wild Bill, he was a warrior, a great Indian warrior. And here he is. And everybody thinks because he can't speak that he's kind of mentally deficient, but in his mind he's remembering the glory days of hunting the buffalo and being a great warrior, and he's thinking about his life before all this took place. But he winds up, so you read about how does he survive in France, turn of the century, can't speak the English, he gets discharged from the hospital. How's he going to survive? It's really interesting. These I have not read by James Welch, The Fool's Crow. And I haven't read this one by James Welch, Winter in the Blood. Says here, the narrator of this beautiful, sometimes bizarre tale is a sensitive, self-destructive young man living on the Blackfoot Reservation in Montana. He is haunted by memories of an older brother dead at the age of 14, of his father who made white men laugh at the local bar, found frozen to death on a snowdrift, and his once proud heritage. He sleepwalks through his chores, consoles himself with women. The visions he sees and the echoes he hears are swallowed up in Montana's vast emptiness. Yet he struggles against the emptiness, searching for something that will bind him to the land of his ancestors. So I found that. And then I found this collection of short stories, The Chauffeur. I found this at Bibles to Mexico. These are stories by Howard Norman. I have 2 novels. I think he's a Canadian writer. No, it says here he resides in Vermont and Washington, D.C. National Book Award nominee for fiction. I have 2 novels by him, and I have The Artist, the Bird Artist by Howard Norman. Howard Norman's spare, lovely, haunting novel begins in 1911. Its narrator Fribian Vast is a bird artist. He draws and paints the birds of Witless Bay, his remote Newfoundland coastal village home. In the first paragraph of his tale, Fabian reveals that he has murdered the village lighthouse keeper, Bartho August. Later he confesses who and what drove him to his crime. A measured and profoundly engrossing story of passion, betrayal, guilt, and redemption between men and women. This got a lot of praise when it came out. And then I have Howard Norman's novel, What Is Left the Daughter. 17-year-old Wyatt Hiller is suddenly orphaned when his parents, within hours of each other, jump off the two different bridges. The result of their separate involvements with some same compelling woman, a Halifax switchboard operator and aspiring actress. The suicides cause Wyatt to move to a small town, middle economy, to live with his uncle and aunt and ravishing cousin Tilda, setting in motion the novel's chain of life-altering passions and the wartime purity. At its core is the arrival of a German student, Hans Moring, actual historical incidents, including a German U-boat sinking of the Nova Scotia Newfoundland ferry Caribou, lend intense narrative power to Norman's uncannily betrayed story. So then, I found a novel by Cheryl Walters at Goodwill, The Paying Guest, and I already have this. I also found at Bibles to Mexico a Philip Roth that I didn't have, The Professor of Desire. Now, when I found this at Bibles to Mexico yesterday, I thought, well, maybe I have it, because I have a lot of novels by Philip Roth, but to my amazement, I didn't have this one. And I started reading it last night. It's a very slim volume. And so I was really pleased to find a Philip Roth. Next month, a massive biography on Philip Roth comes out, which I have pre-ordered. And I also read yesterday Susan Howatch, Scandalous Risk. So anyway, I collect Philip Roth. If I see a novel by Howard Norman, I found his short stories. And I found, this is nonfiction, it's a history of Custer and Little Bighorn told from the perspective of the Indians and how they looked at it. So it's very interesting. So I found Killing Custard. So this is from the perspective of the plain Indians and not from the white man or from how they view the killing of Custard. And so I have these other novels by James Welch. The Heartsong of the Charging Elk. It's really a great novel. I highly recommend it. These I have not read. The Fool's Crow. He also wrote The Indian Lawyer, which I don't have. And what else he wrote? I don't know. Anyway, I recommend his writings. So, James Welch, Winter in the Blood. And then I collect Jonathan D. Spence. He's an authority on the history and culture of China. He wrote a lot of books, which I don't have. He wrote To Change China, Western Advisors in China, 1620 to 1960. The Emperor of China, Self-Portrait of some Chinese ruler, 1974. The Death of Woman Wang, The Gate of Heavenly Peace, the Chinese and the Revolution. So, and then I found this book by Jonathan D. Spence, The Chain's Great Continent, China and Western Minds. I also found these two books at the Gateway Center. The Father of Us All, War and History, Ancient and Modern by Victor Davis Hanson. These are essays on war. Something like that. Look at military history. It looked kind of interesting. It was only... so I picked it up. There's somebody... I saw a recommendation here. Let me see here. Oh, yeah. Anyway, I picked this up. The Father of Us All, War and History, Ancient and Modern. And then I found this book, The Measure of God, by Larry Witham. Our century-long struggle to reconcile science and religion, the story of the Gifford lectures. The Gifford lectures are lectures, I think they're sponsored in England and the main speakers in these lectures show how you reconcile science and religion together. God and science. With the rise of modern science, the age-old belief in a universe made by God has been threatened. Can one continue to believe in God, or has religion become outmoded superstition? Many of our greatest minds have debated these questions, and the drive to reconcile God and science is rife with human drama, murder trials, global journeys, breakthrough discoveries, church schisms, and world wars. This book tells the story of our heroic, optimistic struggle to know truth, to dare to use all of our faculties and talents to take the measure of God. So it looked pretty interesting. You can find sometimes at used bookstores Gifford lectures, volumes. I might have one downstairs somewhere. I don't know. So that's the kind of books I look for when I go book collecting. When I go to thrift stores, used book sales, I try to find books that I have already in my book collection, my library. So thought I'd just share that with you. Hope you're having a good week. Carol called yesterday. She's coming back Sunday instead of Monday. So that's kind of nice. So today, it's supposed to be rainy. It's still dark outside. I'll write in my diary, drink my coffee, and go through the day. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for the new subscribers. And until next time, bye.